Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of the Ford Ranger with the misfire and no codes. If you watched the previous video, you see what I did to diagnose this truck, how I found that there was no compression on one of the cylinders due to a valve issue. If you want to see that, you can click or tap right here to watch that video. Check it out if you haven't. It's a pretty interesting find. It's interesting how this problem happened and kind of a freak thing. We really don't know why. The truck only has 60-ish thousand miles. It doesn't make sense why something like this would fail so prematurely. But the more I got into the engine, the more I found that this thing looks like it's been neglected. The oil appears to have been pretty sludged at one point, and I can't help but wonder if that's what contributed to the failure of this valve on the passenger side cylinder head. But here I've got a refurbished head, or a rebuilt head. So you can see we're all good to go here. Everything's great. New valves, new seals, new everything. Oh, look at that, nice and purty. Ain't that beautiful? So I'm going to go over the cylinder head installations, putting everything back together. Here's some bits and pieces on the cylinder heads going back together. And then, fingers crossed, this thing will start up and run just fine with no more misfires. So here we go. So as you can see, I've got the passenger side cylinder head off. Here's the new cylinder head gasket, and I've got the intake gasket laying off to the side here as well. But what I want to show you here is the proper way to clean the cylinder head surface of the engine. What you want to do to clean your cylinder heads is you never want to use an abrasive wheel or a wire wheel for a couple reasons. The first off being is you can actually dig into the block or the cylinder head if you're going to reuse the cylinder head, and that can cause problems with the head gasket sealing. The other reason too is those tiny little particles can actually make their way down into the engine and cause wear. What I like to do is I like to take some brake clean, wet down the surface of the block there where the cylinder head meets it. Take a nice fresh razor blade, and be careful, you should probably use a scraper tool or at least some gloves while you're doing this. But what you want to do next is scrape the cylinder head off. And what this will do is this will get all the old gasket material off the surface of the engine block. And you can do the same to the cylinder head if you're reusing your cylinder heads. And generally, once you get the larger pieces of the gasket material off by scraping with the blade facing towards the area you're scraping in or in the direction that you're going in, flip it around and then pull it backwards like so. This will give you a nice, smooth, and flat surface. Once you've got that all cleaned off, just take a rag, wipe it down, clean that surface off, and then you're ready for your head gasket. Many head gaskets will have the word "up" here stamped on them. That's how you know which side of the gasket goes up. They're usually interchangeable from each cylinder bank here, the driver's side and the passenger side, but you want to make sure that you find this "up" stamped on the gasket and make sure that side of the head gasket is facing up. Another thing you never want to do is reuse cylinder head bolts. These bolts are torqued to yield, and basically what that is the bolts are tightened down to a certain amount of torque, then they're turned an additional certain amount of degrees. This causes the threads to stretch. And what happens is if you reuse the old bolts, you can stretch out the threads and they won't hold, and then your head gasket leaks. That's why you always use new cylinder head bolts whenever reinstalling a cylinder head. Here's the intake gasket. And once again, you'll see this stamped here, this side down. So obviously that side faces down on the cylinder head surface here. Now here are the torque specs for these cylinder head bolts. As you can see, tighten them to 59 foot-pounds of torque, then you actually loosen them one full turn, and then you tighten them another 40 foot-pounds, and then 90 degrees, and then an additional 90 degrees. That will loosen each bolt one full turn. Now that that's done, we'll tighten them back up to 40 foot-pounds here. Turn the torque down a little bit. And following the same torquing sequence, we'll tighten them back up to 40 foot-pounds. Now that that's complete, we're going to go back and tighten each one of the bolts 90 degrees one pass, and then another 90 degrees a second pass, and all these will have been tightened to the proper torque setting. Now the first pass isn't so bad, but the second pass gets really difficult. As you can see, that's 104.5 foot-pounds of torque that these have been torqued to. That's quite a bit, but that'll ensure that your head gasket seals and that there are no leaks. Now these are the push rods of the engine. What these push rods do is they push up on the rocker arm, which pushes down on the valve. The camshaft pushes the lifter up, which pushes the push rod up, and then on the engine here I'll show you what the rocker arm does and how it opens and closes the valves. Now it's important to make sure that these get put back in the same place that they were taken out of the engine, because they may be different lengths. Now in this case they're all the same length, but some engines have different length push rods. If you put the wrong push rod in the wrong place, you might bend a valve. So you got to be sure that these go back in the same place that they came out. Now this is a rocker arm. What the rocker arm does is as the camshaft pushes the push rod up on this side of the rocker arm here, pushes the rocker arm up on the left and then down on the right here, which pushes the valve down into the cylinder head and opens it. Alright, so moments like these are always big and exciting. You've just spent all these hours, all these, in fact, days sometimes, working on a truck, putting everything back together, and you know that if you forgot one thing, everything might have to come back apart all over again. So this is a really big moment, why I always take these on video, because we've just finished doing hours and hours and hours of work, and now's the time. We start it, hope nothing leaks, hope it runs fine, hope there's no noises. This is an exciting moment. I've done many of these before, but still, every single one of them is always a, okay, here we go type of moment. So without further ado, let's cross our fingers, hope that this thing starts, runs, and doesn't leak.